who has to avoid the 0-2 hole in the NFL as we get into week 2 of the NFL season? Since 1990, only 31 of the 270 NFL teams that began a season 0-2 went to the playoffs. Last year, the Bengals recovered from losing their first 2 games to finish 12-4, and they reached the AFC title game, or maybe not last year, but when the Bengals did start 0-2, they recovered, go 12-4, and reach the AFC title game. They're 11.5% going back to those 31 of 270 NFL teams since 1990. 11.5%. That's the amount of 0-2 teams in the NFL since 1990, the last 33 years, make the NFL playoffs. I've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I got to count over here. I've got 9 NFL teams, really one that needed to, 2 that don't have to, but 9 teams in total I'm going to discuss here that have to avoid this 0-2 hole. I think the first obvious one is the Buffalo Bills. Josh Allen playing as horribly as he did. That's a big concern for us. We don't want to see Josh Allen play that way. We know Josh Allen is capable of playing much better than that. And, losing such an emotional game, kind of mailing in what was an emotional game for the Jets. You don't want to fall to 0-2 here. I mean, when you're talking about the Bills being 0-2 with the expectations that they had this year, that's not something that's going to fly at all. Now, they do play the Raiders Sunday, September 17th, 1 p.m., and I think they'll be able to avoid the hole here. I really do. We're going to have the week 2 picks coming up, but I've got the Bills winning this in a bounce back game, so they do avoid the 0-2 hole. But with the way Josh Allen played in week 1, with the way the Jets are going to have the grid in the division, Miami's the best team in the division right now, and we don't really know what the Patriots are going to be yet. And you can say we don't know what any of the division is going to be. I always say September and October football is kind of bullshit until you get to the back half of the season, November, December, who's playing in January and February. That is where the real rubber hits the road. I've got the Bills avoiding the 0-2 hole realistically, but if they do fall to 0-2, you're going to start to see that panic meter creep up. The Kansas City Chiefs, I think, will easily avoid the 0-2 hole, being the defending Super Bowl champions. We know they want to go back-to-back. They want to repeat. They play the Jacksonville Jaguars in the Jaguars home opener. I think it's going to be a fantastic game between Trevor Lawrence, number 1 overall pick, and maybe we can say now that Patrick Mahomes, of course, should have been the number 1 overall pick in that draft because of what Mahomes has turned into. But there's going to be a battle here, an absolute battle. I've got the Chiefs beating the Jags, though, but the Chiefs have to avoid that 0-2 hole. Again, 11.5% of teams, you don't want to see that happen. Travis Kelce is coming back. Apparently, he was trolling his knee injury. Chris Jones is back. He signs the 1-year deal. Haven't forgot about posting that clip. We're still going to drop that on the YouTube channel as well. But the Chiefs have to avoid the 0-2 hole. I don't think they'll fall victim to it. But if you did have them fall to 0-2, the whole house is coming down. They're selling all the cards. Or I guess they're pulling the pot out from the middle of the table. That's not something that Chiefs bettors, fans, and overall spectators are going to want to see from this team. The Los Angeles Chargers have to avoid the 0-2 hole. They lose in week 1, shootout with the Dolphins. I had the Chargers winning that game because I really just thought the Chargers were a better team than the Miami Dolphins. They play the Titans this week on the road. Some people are picking the Titans. Pick a Side podcast. I saw 3 out of the 4 of you. I want to say, was it Dells? I can't remember how they have the heads lined up on there. But a lot of y'all were picking Tennessee. I'm going to take the Chargers in this game. They do avoid the 0-2 hole, but 0-2 hole, Brandon Staley's hot seat definitely starts to heat up. Again, defensive-minded head coach. You have the most expensive roster in the NFL defensively. What are you doing? You have a Bosa. You have a Derwin James. You have an Asante Samuel Jr. What's going on? Chargers, I've been saying for a couple seasons now, it's time to get it together. And if they go into the 0-2 hole, I already know Brandon Staley's job is going to be called for. It's kind of already getting looked at after week 1 because they're having questions. Is he the guy? We know Herbert's Herbert. If Herbert continues to put up the numbers he does and continue to have the support and love that he does as a player, he's not going anywhere. We know he's not going anywhere because of the deal he just signed. So they're going to be taking a look at Brandon Staley if they go 0-2 here. The Denver Broncos have to avoid the 0-2 hole as well. They absolutely have to avoid going 0-2. A lot of dink and dunk offense in week 1. We see Russell Wilson not take any deep shots, really. We see Sean Payton have an onside kick to open the game that turns into a go-ahead score for the Raiders in a 1-point loss. The Sean Payton era is off to a very underwhelming start. You cannot go 0-2 here. You can't do it. I want to see who the Broncos play because I'm having a hard time remembering. I thought I had it written out here. Yeah, the Broncos play the Commanders Sunday, September 17th, 4:25. Broncos are at home. Broncos were also at home to open up against the Raiders as well. They can win this game, definitely. But Eric Bieniemy is still that OC. The Commanders still just had a hard-fought win, really, against the Arizona Cardinals. It could be a potential upset. I don't want it to be an upset. I'm rooting big time for Sean Payton and Russell Wilson. Outside of my Saints, I'm probably rooting for Sean Payton and Russell Wilson. Like, they're at the top of my list of people that I'm rooting for outside of New Orleans. It's a great story. I believe they're really going to be able to have a crazy offense. Russell Wilson will be brought back to life. All the respect will be earned, but not if they slip into that 0-2 hole. The Pittsburgh Steelers, after getting blown out in week 1, 30-7 at home against the San Francisco 49ers, who are the best team in the NFL right now, they have to avoid the 0-2 hole as well. All the preseason hype, the picket fence, hilarious. I mean, you are going into a game this weekend that is huge. It is. And after coming off of a loss to the San Francisco 49ers, well, really a game next week, excuse me, with it being Monday Night Football, you're playing the Cleveland Browns, who just embarrassed the Cincinnati Bengals. They gave Joe Burrow his worst career day at the office. Worst day at the office in his career by far. And Joe Burrow is going to have a lot of adjustments to make. That front seven for the Browns secondary, the entire Browns defensive side of the ball, insane the way that they played against the Cincinnati Bengals. And you know they're going to bring that to the Steelers. The Steelers just played the best defense in the NFL in the San Francisco 49ers. The Browns right now are an elite defense, top 5, top 7, top 9, whatever the hell you want to say. When you do that to Joe Burrow, understand it's a calf injury, understand that he's got the week 1 jitters, understand he didn't play in preseason, but the facts are still the facts. I've got the Steelers winning this game because I just don't see Mike Tomlin losing at home again on Monday Night Football on a nationally televised game to the Cleveland Browns. Now, the Browns are good enough to win the football game. I'm rooting big time for the Cleveland Browns, rooting for Deshaun Watson as well. But the Steelers cannot go 0-2 here. A couple more teams in the AFC before we get into the NFC. Cincinnati Bengals clearly cannot go 0-2 either. They've got Super Bowl aspirations. They've got AFC title game aspirations, back-to-back years with the AFC title game. Just speaking of the Cleveland Browns, who gave them their worst career day at the office. They're not going to go 0-2, though. They're playing a Baltimore Ravens team that is missing two very key pieces in their offensive lineman, an elite safety and an elite running back when he's healthy. That's going to be tough. Joe Burrow probably will have a big bounce back day, not having Marcus Williams back in that secondary. Now, of course, you still have that Ravens defensive culture and you still have, the defensive coordinator in place. But the Cincinnati Bengals have to avoid the 0-2 hole. Now, they were the team I just mentioned that did go 12-4, get to the AFC title game, and that's great. That is absolutely fantastic. But with that week 1 outing against that Browns defense, which there might just be a couple defenses in the NFL that are better than that, but guess what? You're going to have to see them again. Bengals can't go 0-2. I don't think they will. The only AFC team look great, and Coolidge is already on full display. Already on full display. Nothing you can say about it. You see the effect he is already having on Anthony Richardson as he goes toe-to-toe in week 1 with the former number 1 overall pick. So, I mean, yeah, the Colts are playing the number 2 overall pick, respectfully, in CJ Stroud, and the number 3 overall pick in Will Anderson, going up against the number 4 overall pick in Anthony Richardson. I've got the Colts winning this football game, so they'll be 1-1. The Colts won't make the playoffs in the AFC simply because of the fact of how loaded it is. And even if Anthony Richardson does play at a very high level for a rookie, like even if he possibly flirted with Justin Herbert type rookie numbers or 75 to 80% of that, I just don't know if the team around him has got enough to take him far. But damn if he doesn't look good. Damn if he doesn't look good. So that's the only AFC team. Bills, Chiefs, Chargers, Broncos, Steelers, Bengals need to and have to avoid the 0-2 hole. The Colts will avoid the 0-2 hole. CJ Stroud is actually questionable in this game with a shoulder injury. And Anthony Richardson looks good. Looks damn good. On to the NFC teams that need to avoid the 0-2 hole. Seattle Seahawks. They lose horribly to the what we all thought were going to be very underwhelming Los Angeles Rams. The Rams with Puka Nakua, or Puka Nakua, however you say it, absolutely go off. Guy turns into Cooper Kupp. Tutu Atwell goes off as well. Both of them, I think both of them having 119 receiving yards, if I'm not mistaken. Matthew Stafford being very comfortable. Now, Devon Witherspoon was not playing, which is very apparent. You see it in the secondary. Charles Cross and, damn, I just forgot the other lineman's name. We just talked about it in the injury segment. Both of those tackles are possibly going to be out. It's going to be very tough here. It's going to be very tough because when you look at the fact that, again, they're going up against that Lions team, it's going to, the Lions defense has to still come into form, but this could be the game that it happens, especially with the tackle questions. Thankfully, Devon Witherspoon's going to be back, but the Seahawks have to avoid the 0-2 hole because they're one of the better teams that we're looking at in the NFC to not make it out, but make it into the playoffs. Of course, the Niners are going to be there to win the division, but if the Seahawks play well enough, they could damn sure give them a hard time for it. We've seen it in years past. No question about that. But the Seahawks have to avoid the 0-2 hole with the talent that they have. Geno Smith clearly is trying to still prove himself. One comeback player of the year is great, but that was literally an anomaly compared to your career. And Pete Carroll's still got to do some things for people to buy in more on him. Not buy in more on him, but we've wanted to see more out of Pete Carroll for a while, especially going to back-to-back Super Bowls. The Minnesota Vikings needed to avoid the 0-2 hole, but now they're here. We talked about them earlier in the show. 11-0 last year in one-score games, already 0-2 this year. They were undefeated last year in one-score games. They are nothing but defeated this year in one-score games. And with the Vikings being another top or potentially top NFC team, I had them winning 8 or 9 games. I can't necessarily remember. With the Vikings being a top NFC team, with them possibly, some people saying that they could hang with the 49ers later in the postseason if they had to. They could possibly hang with the Eagles later in the postseason if they had to. I don't think that's really much to say because you've got Kyle Shanahan, obviously, with the Niners and really just a loaded team, especially that defensive side of the ball. And then you've got the Eagles who just outmatch everyone in quarterback. No doubt about that. And Kirk Cousins is a respectable guy. And again, he can only do so much. They blew a 4-touchdown game from Kirk Cousins. Not something you want to see at all, especially with the expectations that the Vikings fans had coming into this season. Because we know they're better than this. Justin Jefferson, Jordan Addison, both look great. Alexander Mattison, TJ Hawkinson, still got Harrison Smith. You still got Danielle Hunter. Like, you want to keep this momentum up that you had in the offseason and really keep it going forward so you're not in this 0-2 hole and literally having a 11.5% chance of making the playoffs. And this team doesn't need to avoid the 0-2 hole, but I would like them to because I still have them winning the division, barring what the Lions turn into, is the Chicago Bears. They lose 38-20 in their opener, of course, against the Green Bay Packers. Jordan Love goes off. Justin Fields, unfortunately, does not. They still look like the worst defense in the league compared to them being the worst defense in the league last year. And then also, they play the Bucks. They play the Bucks, who are at home now, coming off of a nice win to the Vikings that I just mentioned, needed to miss the 0-2 hole, beat them in that one-score game. The Bucks are feeling a lot of great momentum right now. Baker Mayfield showed them that he's able to do the little things that he needs to do and still has that offensive talent around him. The defense is still intact. The defense is definitely better than Chicago's defense. And we would probably say right now that Bucks offense is looking better than the Bears offense. But of course, we'll have some takeaways if that game ends up being good for us. But teams that have to avoid the 0-2 hole, because only 31 of 270 football teams since 1990 began a season 0-2 and went to the playoffs. That is 11.5%. The Bills, Chiefs, Chargers, Broncos, Steelers, Bengals, and Seahawks absolutely need to avoid the 0-2 hole. The Colts and Bears, it would be nice to see them avoid the 0-2 hole, but they don't have to. I think there's a lot of hidden potential in both of those teams. It's going to take some time to come out. Clearly, the Minnesota Vikings are in the 0-2 hole already.